My pleasure to introduce Paul Baker from Allen Carr's Easyway. And he's the global CEO of Allen Carr's Easyway. And I guess the important thing that we've been talking about this morning is early diagnosis, but what's better than early diagnosis? Prevention. And prevention is always better than cure. And there's lots of studies that suggest that particularly preventing cancer can be done in about 40% of patients. So what I was mentioning about 1 and 2 earlier, well, we could cut that in half almost if we do all the preventative ways. And the very top of that list remains to this day. Obesity is catching up, but still to this day, smoking is the biggest one. So I'm delighted to introduce Paul Baker, who'll be speaking about that.
Thank you very much there, Miles. Sorry, I'm using 2 different machines here because we had a few technical issues earlier, so just bear with me. Is that working? Great. No, well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. And I'd like to congratulate everybody in the room for everything you do to try and help people with cancer. It's fantastic news, so well done. I've been asked to talk a little bit about Allen Carr's Easyway, which is a drug-free and clinically proven method for stopping, helping people to freedom from their addiction. I've been asked to talk a little bit more about who we are, what we do, and also how we communicate to patients, and hopefully they'll be useful to you, and also some of the results that we've got from our work with the NHS. So if we just move on. Many of you may have heard of us through our book, The Easy Way to Stop Smoking, which is now 40 years old, but it's sold about 20 million copies worldwide. Or you may have seen our new version of the book, which is fully updated, which is in your packs, which you've all got a copy of, which is fully updated to include vaping and also a bit more psychological things in there, which we didn't have sort of 40 years ago. But we've also got best-selling other titles for other things like vaping and alcohol and sugar and cocaine. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But the key thing is we actually started with our gold standard seminar. That's where it all began with Alan in London all those years ago. And what he was seeing so many people come to see him that he thought, I'm going to do something about this and try and reach even more people globally. So he wrote a book. And that's what I say most people have heard of now. But it was always the seminar that was the gold standard that started everything. And it's estimated the method's helped over 50 million people with lots of different addictions and issues in that time. So if you have a quick look, we're scientifically proven, as I've mentioned already. NICE have approved Allen Carr's Easyway. They've said, which is very nice of them, that we're cost-effective and cost-saving to the NHS, but more than that it should be made available to all stop-smoking services across the country. We're not quite there yet, because it always takes time to get through, but we're gradually spreading across the country and helping more and more places. We're also partnered with the World Health Organization, which is very unusual. They've only got 6 external partners, so we're sitting alongside the likes of Amazon and Meta and Google, and then there's us. I wish we were quite as big as them, but we're not. But we're trying our hardest to get everywhere, but we've got the global reach, which is quite good. The key thing about the method is it's drug-free, which means that there's no medications involved, and there's minimal, if any, long-term effects. In fact, we've not come across one yet in the 40 years we've been doing it because it's drug-free, so what's the risk? And I'll go through, obviously, a bit more about the method in a minute so you can understand what we do. The other thing is it's quick and accessible. It's a 1-day seminar, and that's just it is 1 day, all done in 1 day. It's not done over a few days. But it's in very simple English. There's no jargon involved, and I'll explain quite how that works in a minute. So hang on, bear me with this as I'm trying to flick between these two. So so what addictions do we actually help with? Well, there's a number here. So obviously stop smoking, we've talked about, stop vaping, but also we help with drinking, weight, emotional eating, and drugs, so cannabis, cocaine, opioids, gambling, there's tech and social media addiction, and there's also things like enjoy better sleep, enjoy flying, enjoy exercise, as well as get out of debt and overcome anxiety because what we do is we change the way people think about their addiction or their issue so that they can deal with these things. We've got a lot of famous faces. These are just a few of them. There's hundreds on the website if you want to go and have a look. The big thing from all of these is that they've given their testimonials freely. We haven't charged for anything. They've just sent us little messages after they've attended, which is very kind of them. So the seminar, what happens in a seminar? As I said, it's the gold standard of our method. It's a one-day seminar. Again, just to reiterate, that's one day and that's it. And what we do is you can access it at a centre or online. It's just as effective in either way. We're actually seeing more people attend online now than they've done in the past. Ever since COVID, people are more used to doing it. They don't want to travel, so it makes it much easier for them. There's no cost then of travel as well, which is quite good. Both are with a live facilitator, and the key thing about the live facilitator is that they've given up with the method. So whether it's drugs or alcohol or smoking or vaping, they've actually given up with that method, so they fully relate to the people they're dealing with. If it's smoking, then they smoke and vape all day. In fact, if you go back in the past, the room was full of smoke. As we went through the seminar, you could only see the people in the room. Those days, of course, have long gone now, but we have regular smoking breaks, and that's a key part of the method until right at the end, and we'll come back to that in a minute. It removes all the illusions and the perceived benefits of their addiction, whether it's smoking or alcohol. And that's the key thing of the method. That's what we're trying to achieve. There's no focus on the negatives or health issues, mainly because the good news is that the campaign's got out there. People are aware of that. So what we don't want to do is shut them down. We want to open them up and open their minds to what we're trying to say about why they continue to do what they're doing. And again, it's in simple English, which is very important. There's a post-attendance gentle support campaign that's done to keep in touch. They can reach us easily if they need to. And there's some shorter booster seminars, should they need them afterwards. But you've got to go to the main seminar first. It doesn't work otherwise. There's also an online video program, which they can access. There's an express version or a more detailed extended version if they want to use those. The beauty of that, of course, is that you can access it anytime, anywhere. But of course, it's pre-recorded. You don't have the benefit of dealing with a live person to be able to ask questions and interact with. Otherwise, it's exactly the same as our main seminar. It deals with the same issues. So let's just look at those in a little bit more detail. So how does the method actually work? Well, the key thing is we change the way they think about their addiction. We do it in sort of 3 stages. That's why it's called cognitive restructuring therapy, because we're changing the way they think back to how it was before their addiction started. That's the key thing. So we're putting the brain back to how it was. It's a term that Professor West coined for us, which is very good. So we look to understand their addiction. We help them understand where they are, what they're doing. We then help them to transform their understanding of their addiction in the seminar. And then we remove the fear so that they can leave without any feeling of deprivation at the end of the seminar. So I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail as we click through. But another way of looking at it is what we talk about is the maze. That people are trapped in a maze. It's the addiction that's put them in the maze. And what they need to do is they need to figure out a way of, they're unlikely to find a way of getting free unless they're given the right map to find freedom. And that's what we do. We give them a route, a map, a plan to get out of there. So what we do that by showing them, we break down their illusions about their addiction. We remove the brainwashing about their addiction. And then we restructure them back to how they were pre the start of their addiction. So let's look at those in a bit more detail. So understand, so what am I talking about here? Well, there's no scare tactics. I've already mentioned that. There's no shocking images. That just shuts them down. They know about those. That's not what we're trying to achieve. We want them to be open-minded on what we're talking about. So instead what we do is we explain and correct the misconceptions that keep them hooked. We look at the mental aspects of their addiction, not just the physical. And that's the key to being free. They've got to change the way they think about it and get their head right. That's how we get them free from their addiction. The physical side is actually quite mild, as long as we've dealt with the mental side of things. We actually say that the physical addiction is like a little monster inside their head telling them to do things, but it's the big monster, which is the mental side, that's the problem. They've got to defeat that big monster. So you say, what keeps them hooked? They generally believe they get some genuine pleasure or benefit from their addiction. They might feel that they enjoy life. It helps them enjoy life. It reduces stress, helps them handle stress, relaxes, socialise. All these sort of perceived benefits from their addiction. And that's what we're trying to counter and help them understand that's not the case. There's also the fear of failure, which is quite a powerful motive for a lot of people. There's also the fear of success. Because if they succeed, this has been their crutch their life. How can they live without it? They can't. That's part of their persona and who they are. So we break down all those illusions. And it's the fear that keeps them hooked, and that's the thing that we're trying to break down. So we explain, what's the worst that can happen. So I don't know if they're there to be able to play the video. Can they just press the video? There we go. Sorry, it's just a little humour there, but the key thing is that from the smoking point of view, they're smoking before they attend a seminar. They smoke all the way through the seminar, so what's the worst that happens? It doesn't work, and they end up smoking afterwards. So, really, there's nothing to lose. Just come along and give it a go. Freedom. You've got a nice pile of cigarette packets here. This is actually from one of our seminars. I'll come back to that in a minute. But as I say, it's a one-day seminar, so it's very one-off seminar. It's quite quick and easy. We have a ritual final cigarette at the end of the seminar, when we get to the end of the day after 6 hours. We say, right, now's the right time. If you're smoking or if you're drinking, actually, if you're at home, you can have a final drink, but not if you're at the seminars. But if you have a vape, same thing, a final vape. And then what we get them to do is they get them to throw them away. So the cigarettes, they throw into a pile, like you're seeing here. For vapes, we get people, they're at home, same thing, put them into a bucket, destroy them so they can't use them. Pour your alcohol down the sink. You don't need them anymore. You're free. That's the key thing. Because what we've done is we've changed the way they think about it so they don't feel deprived, and that's the thing that keeps bringing them back. And that's the breaking of that willpower, because it's not a willpower approach. The key thing is they're not going to be missing out on anything. So what we then do is we encourage them to go out, socialise. So they should go straight after the seminar. If they go to the pub, if they've got friends that are going out that night, go out and mingle with them. If they're smokers, go and mingle with them. If they're drinkers, same. You won't feel compelled. You might get a little nagging you think, say, I want to have a drink, and go, I don't do that anymore. It's very simple. You just have to change that process. But you don't want to feel deprived, so I can't go out and see anybody, because that's completely negative. It doesn't work. So they're free to go there. So how do you refer clients to us? I'll just sort of cover that a little bit. The good news is it's actually very simple. Direct them to our site. That's the easiest way, but we'll go into some other methods in a minute. We've got pages for all the councils we deal with. We've got a page for the NHS that lists them all, and they're growing all the time. But this is key. When it comes to booking, booking is very, very simple with us. It's a two-step approach because we understand the mentality of addicts, unfortunately. If there's any reason to delay decision or to put it off, they will do. So we make it as simple as possible to book. So here's the example of the web page. This is just the top of the landing page. Say the stop smoking services, GPs in our area, in the areas we work in, hospitals, etc., can direct people to a page, a landing page. The landing page, the top looks like that. But as you scroll down the page, it will cover all of the bits about what's going on in a seminar. There's videos there to explain. There's the celebrity testimonials. There's also real people testimonials on there to give them all the reassurance. But all the way through, there's a blue button which they can click at any point, and that allows them to book. And when they click that button, it goes to a list of all the dates they can choose. And there's a lot of dates, and that's deliberate. Lots of dates, lots of times, because then you're not putting a barrier up or an excuse for people to back away. They can just look at it and they can choose a date and they've booked. We then follow up and get everything else we need from them. But they're locked in. They feel locked into it, and that's a positive thing. I've been also talk a little bit about vaping, so I'll just address that here. Allen Carr's Easyway, we believe the more options for quitting, the better. We see very much that Allen Carr's Easyway, the drug-free approach, is one of the methods to stop. But we get asked about vaping, so let's have a little look. You're probably wondering why there's a building, but I'll come back to that in a minute. The biggest question is it safer than smoking? And when I explain it to people, it's like jumping from a 20-story building and then comparing it to jumping out of a 10-story building. It's safer, but it's not safe. And the problem with vaping at the moment is that we don't know how much safer it is. We're still waiting on those studies to come through, so it could be like jumping from a 19-story building, and that's the challenge with vaping. We're still waiting on those mid and long-term research projects to come through. There's various studies coming through, but there's not enough of them to really get the full picture. And you also got to consider the mental burden of being an addict, which is what happens because it's nicotine addiction with vaping. And also the monetary cost, because you've got the cost of the vapes afterwards. So that's the key thing, that it's another form of nicotine addiction. And that's why with a lot of councils we're now speaking to, they're actually offering a vaping option as well as the smoking. So you've got smokers and vapers that come along to the same seminar, but people who only vape are attending because it's a growing issue, because they found they're hooked to nicotine. So just going to go into this a little bit. What's actually in vapes? Well, the first thing to say is obviously we keep hearing it called vape juice, which is what the big tobacco term is. It's to try and make it sound healthier, like fruit juice. It's not healthy in the slightest. It's got 60 different chemicals in there. Importantly, the 4 main ingredients, none of them are actually designed to be inhaled. And that's still the case. It's not new. So you've got propylene glycol there, which is used in fake smoke and antifreeze to give you that lovely puff of smoke, but actually it's not meant to be inhaled. You've got glycerin in there. And most tests to date, on any of the studies you see on vaping, have been based on vape juice before they've been heated. But of course the whole thing is that you're heating it to create the vapor. So that's the test we really want to understand, and the effects of the lungs and the rest of the body on that. But looking at heated vape juice, there have been various studies, and because the problem is when you're heating a device, the device over time will break down and go into the juice, into the liquid. And that's what's happening. You get things like ultrafine particles break down into the vapor. You get things like cancer-causing toxins in there. You can get heavy metals in there, which are going from the device that break down over time into the juice. Volatile organic compounds. That term again, propylene glycol, which changes its composition when it's heated, and if it gets to the right temperature, it can then become a cancerous toxin again into the vapor. And various other things as well. And the concern is that actually it's much, much worse for the black market vapes because they don't have the same regulation. So they break down much quicker, and they've got lots more issues. What about teen vaping, which is obviously the thing that's affecting, we're probably most aware of? Well, as it says here, over 18% of teenagers vaped in the last 30 days. And that's up from 5% in 2013. So it's a big growth. That's equivalent to a secondary school a day vaping every day. That's a lot of people, a lot of kids. Nicotine content, or what are the ELF bars that they use, can be up to 48 to 50 cigarettes. And they just don't realise it, they just keep puffing away without realising what they're doing. 20% of the people that attend our general public seminars now for smoking actually are vapers who've only ever vaped. It's a growing percentage, it's a growing problem. The good news is that the method works just as well because we deal with nicotine addiction and the way we change the brain, so it doesn't matter. But I thought this was interesting for you. There was a study done by the University of Bath last year on confiscated vapes in schools. There were 600 vapes that they tested across the country from London up to Manchester and Yorkshire, etc. But their study showed that 74% of the schools actually had an issue with vaping infiltration within the school. What was more concerning is that the kids obviously had no idea what was actually in their devices. But a large number of them had spice in there, which you really don't want to be starting on. Many of them contain THC and cannabis, And again, the kids didn't know that was what was in them. And one even contained heroin, and they just didn't realise what was in them. And this is scary. And it's one of the problems because the teens don't fully understand that they're not safe. They think the way it's been marketed, I think, makes them feel that it's safe. It's fruit flavour, so it's all fine. But that's really not a good result. So what we've done is we've created a separate site, particularly, specifically for teens. As you can see on here, you've got a young person on there as well. But it's written for teens, by teens. The videos are by teens, so they can relate to it. There's also a section for parents, so it addresses their questions, and they can understand what's going on. Things like how to identify vapes and things, because some parents haven't got a clue. And also they don't understand, and you can think back to when they were young and smoking, you can smell it on the clothes. Vapes smell like fruit or sweets, they just don't understand it. And the same with schools. We've got some tips there on schools and how to help schools. It's there on allencarr.com, teen-vaping, so you can have a look if you want to. I thought it'd be interesting to share some of the results of our work with the NHS, the stop smoking services. Before I do that, though, just to understand, what we have is some targeting that we're given, so it does skew the results slightly of what they're looking for. So it's not the normal things, but we're asked to do special targeted campaigns. Very effective at generating large numbers of people in the short term, but also ongoing. It includes the hard-to-reach groups, which I know a lot of them we've been talking about, which I'll look at in a minute. An example, we did one the other month, and we got 300 people signing up within a few weeks to book, which is fantastic news. And the other thing is that these tend to be additional people who wouldn't have gone to the stop smoking service in the past. So they may have tried it 20 years ago, but they think there's nothing for them, and suddenly they realise there's something that's now offered that they can try. Generally, the NHS want us to put extra weighting on deprived areas, LGBTQ+, BME, and hardened smokers. So let's have a little look at the results. So I thought it'd be interesting. So, okay. Age profile. This is slightly different to what we'd normally see in our general public seminars, mainly because you're not seeing very many in the 18 to 24 group on here. And that's probably because, obviously, with the smoking, we can't include the vapors, and a lot of those category are vaping. But otherwise, interesting graph. Smoking length, again, this is slightly longer than we normally see. We see a lot more people in their 21 plus years smoking that we're seeing and helping. It doesn't make a difference to us because the method, it doesn't matter if you've been smoking 2 weeks or 20 years, it's the same approach. We change the way they think about it and put them back to how they were before. So the same results. Sexuality, there's no impact, again, demographic-wise, we can reach the groups because it doesn't matter, it's a talking approach. Job type, we tend to look at job type 2 different ways, the NHS categories, but also we use ISCO, which is the international standards. It just gives us greater granularity, so you understand things a little bit better. But as you can see on here, again, with the weighting, we've got top one with service and sales, followed by not working and lower management. So it's, we're able to target the groups they wanted. Well over 50% were from a lower socioeconomic group, and a good number from routine and manual workers, which is what they were trying to challenge us to achieve. Long-term health issues. Again, this is interesting. 54% of people say they've got a long-term health issue. You've got to remember this is a smoking service in this case. But the top one is not breathing issues. It's mental health issues that they're coming with. Now that's definitely been growing since COVID, and we're getting more and more people. But it also makes it a bit more challenging when we're dealing with them in the seminars because they want help on other issues as well. We try and manage that effectively. But I just thought it was worth noting. The source, how do they hear about us? We ask them to tick as many boxes as they like on this, but marketing is obviously always the way that they're going to hear about you. That's probably the one they clicked on last. But it's interesting to see a range of other ones from GPs to NHS, etc. on there. But the second biggest is through friends and family, which means the marketing works because we're getting out to everybody, and their friends and their family then say to them, well, give it a go. What you've got to lose, which is positive. Also with the marketing, certainly on Facebook, etc. People can put comments on there, so they put little comments on there saying, you know, Joe, give it a go. I gave up 20 years ago with it. You have a go. And that works very, very effectively. Satisfaction surveys, we obviously ask everybody satisfaction surveys. I know you all do the same. This is very pleasing. This is about the therapist. What's pleasing, of course, about it is that not everybody's going to succeed first time. But they're not giving us a negative rating on here. Same with the overall satisfaction. We've got a small amount there with not satisfied. I actually had a look at this the other day from one of the seminars that we did to see what it was they were complaining about. And I'm sure you'll appreciate this. They were complaining about no free biscuits with their coffee. And they put us down as not happy with the seminar. We can sort of live with that. It's, trying to do something about the biscuits, but it's a bit harsh to rate us negative on that score. But there you go. That's the public for you. So how are the results? Well, what we do is we follow up with people at 4 weeks, but also at 12 weeks, 6 months, and 1 year. And that's deliberate. Normally it's just 4 weeks with a lot of these studies. So it's well over 25% at 4 weeks. And that's only people that have confirmed they've quit. So if they haven't confirmed, they're deemed to be a fail. That's the way it works. But 29% didn't respond, which is frustrating, but after a year, it's the way it goes. That's just what happens. But what we're able to do is look at, it was 15% for NRT from the NICE study that they did a few years ago. But looking in the real world, when I say real world, it's where we deal with the corporates or employers, etc., that they can look at their employees after a year or 2 years and say, well, hang on a minute, they're still employed. Are they smoking or not? And there's also independent studies as well, but it's showing it's well over 40% at a year. And there was an independent study done at a hospital where they offered the seminars to everyone from the cleaners all the way up to the surgeons, and it was well over 40% at 2 years there as well. So it gives us confidence that's probably where it really is. And the great news is, of course, they're free. They're not coming back into the service. They're free, and hopefully reducing their risk of cancer, etc., in the future. So a few testimonials. I just, there's thousands on the website. You're welcome to have a look. I just sort of put a few up here so you can have a little look at. But I thought this was quite a nice one to finish on. But blooming, marvellous, no cravings, just the occasional feeling that something's missing. Then I remember, I don't need that garbage in my body anymore, and I grit it and carry on. Feel great, which is what we want to get to. Because you're not going to forget that you were a smoker. It was a thing you used to do. You're a non-smoker now, you don't do it anymore. And that's the key thing, changing the mentality. So a few practical takeaways that I thought would be useful for you. Another way of looking at it, we talk about the maze. Another way of looking at it is the trap or the prison. So speak in simple English, which is key. Don't dwell on the harm that addiction can cause, because that switches people off, and they don't listen to what you're saying then. The little monster immediately kicks in, and the big monster stops you listening to what's going on. They're trapped. And most of them, all of them will actually know they're trapped. They might brave it out and say, no, I'm not trapped, I'm really doing this, I really enjoy it. But they're trapped. And that's the key thing to say to them, is that we understand you're trapped. We're going to help you free yourself from this trap. And that's the important point. As I say, they're key to understand that they're free. What they need is a map or a way to get free. And that's what they're looking for. And that's where the help comes from us. Without that, they're very likely to go back into the trap at some point. The big issue is mental, and that's what we deal with. We change their perceptions about their addiction and why they think they get something from it, and overcome their fears. And that's what you've got to try and do, so that they don't feel deprived when they leave. One thing that we do find sometimes, which sounds a bit strange, is please, as GPs, don't downplay it. It is an issue, they've got to deal with it. And quite often they put off attending because they get told, it's okay, you've got time to come back and do this in a few years' time. But no, get on with it now. There's no point in downplaying it, it just doesn't work. I'm not going to play the video again, don't worry. But be positive. Don't focus on the negatives, because they understand those. They're afraid of what they're doing and why they're in the trap. They understand how the harm it causes. The exception is with young people who, unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, don't understand fully the dangers or the harm vaping. They think they're fine, they'll be okay. I think we're all young once you understand. But they don't understand that there is danger with vaping. A number of people we've spoken to, young people, and they just don't understand that. So what stops them trying is their real fear of either failure or of success. And that's what we can help them overcome. And remember, what's the worst that can happen? They were smoking, they attend and they're smoking during the day. Well, the worst is they go back to carry on smoking. They've just done nothing apart from waste a day seeing us. So it's not, there's nothing worse. You know, it's fine. Now in your packs, we've put a golden ticket in there, so you can have a look as well as the book. It explains a little bit more about Allen Carr's Easyway and the method. It's got a QR code on there, and it actually gives you a free video if you want to have watch the video that I talked about earlier, the video program which goes on for 6 hours. But you can watch it, skim through it and see what we talk about, so it gives you a feel for that. As I say, there's a QR code on there where you can just type in the URL. And that's the presentation, so thank you very much. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrula. I work for Cedar Signs. I'm a GP by background and now one of the product managers. Most of you have probably seen my face because I've been hanging around for years now. But Paul, if you come sit with me, we can do some questions.
Yeah, no. Got a comfy seat.
Yeah. So, does anyone have any questions? No? Oh, we've got one at the front, Cherry.
Thank you very much for that. I must admit, I didn't know much about Allen Carr's Easyway. I'm a GP, and I can see that the NHS refer a very small amount in. And I'm sitting with some of my colleagues here, and we're just saying, you know, we really should tell our patients about this. So what I'm trying to understand is, I mean, I've never smoked, but you know, you're told that the physical addiction is a huge thing.
It's not.
So is it really just mind over matter, or is there something more to it?
Well, so we talk about the small monster and the big monster. The small monster is your physical addiction that kicks in to say, look, I need this. But people get that when they go flying. If you go on a flight, you don't need to smoke. You know you can't smoke, and you can survive quite easily on a long-haul flight without any problems. And the minute they come off, suddenly they're going, oh, I need a cigarette now. So that's the physical thing, but the mental thing is what's the real problem. Because that's the issue. If you can deal with that and change the way they think about it, it's the same with alcohol as well. It works just as effectively with alcohol. They can break free. They realise that there's no deprivation involved and that they're not giving anything up. That's the key thing. So when they get that twinge to say, oh, I need a cigarette, they go, no, I don't do that anymore. I understand the illusions on it. It's not doing anything for me. It's not going to help me relax. I don't need it. And that's the thing that we do. We change how they think about it so they can go back to that state. And that's what's so powerful about it. And obviously the other thing is there's no cost involved because once they're free, they don't have to buy any more cigarettes or vape juice or anything, or NRT or anything. There's no more cost. They've attended and they're free. But yeah, it's really is the mental side is the big thing. If we can change that, it's so much easier to deal with withdrawal. It's so mild.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? There's one over there in the corner. James, you're going to go.
Paul, thanks so much. That was really great. I wanted to ask you, because obviously number one is getting people to stop smoking, or number two is getting people to stop smoking. Number one potentially would be, how do we prevent them smoking in the first place? And that sometimes is really hard to do, especially because a lot of the data says is when they start, then they often turn into longer term smokers and they make this decision quite early on. In the data that you presented, you talked about the mental burden and how this is really a more mental problem that these patients or people face. Is there a way that you can predict, or you have seen patterns of patients or demographics that are more vulnerable or more susceptible to addiction when it comes to smoking or alcohol, that we potentially as practitioners could do more to identify them, to say, how can we pick them up earlier because they're more at risk of addiction?
Sure. I mean, that's one of the common misconceptions that we talk about, saying that there's people that are more vulnerable to becoming an addict, and that's just not the case. The key thing is that anybody can become an addict. There may be other factors that are around. that are making them think that this is a way out, that if they take that, it'll ease their life. That's slightly different. But actually, when it comes to the addiction, everyone's at risk on it. So it's the same approach to try and change how they think about it, and the mental approach. So spotting somebody is quite hard. I think there's not really any obvious sort of different signs that you're going to see on that, apart from maybe you have a background like deprivation, or if they've got mental health issues, they may feel that this is a way to ease their burden. And we have to help them understand that it's not actually, it's doing actually the reverse of what they think it's doing. And but that's it. There isn't a category really of people that are liable to be addicts who aren't addicts. It's everybody can become an addict.
Thank you for that, Paul. I think we have a question at the back.
Hi, I have 2 questions.
Yes,
The first one is just with alcohol. Obviously, if someone's a heavy drinker, we wouldn't want them to stop abruptly. Do you guys have kind of a way of addressing that within the course?
Yes, no, it's interesting because we've had this. We're actually in discussions with a local authority to do alcohol, and we've been talking to them about this. It very much depends on the person, and we look at it and we try and understand their background. Depending on the level of the heavy drinker, actually, we've had a lot of heavy drinkers. We've had people that have been admitted to hospital in the past that have attended, and by doing the method, they've actually left abruptly and not had an issue. So it is possible. Obviously, depending on their status, if there is a risk there, we always say to them, this is not the method for you because it is an abrupt method. That's what we do. We will change the way you think about it so that you will be able to go free and you'll be able to cope with that physical withdrawal, which is, for drugs as well, it can be quite significant. But if you're mentally prepared for it, it's much easier to deal with it. It becomes much milder, and that's the point. So yes, we review them and see what they are, but we've had people coming that have been very heavy drinkers that have been admitted to hospital, and they've left without any problems at all. And we do follow up afterwards. We don't just leave them, we follow up, and they've been free. So it really is a question of changing how they think about it, and then they realise it's doing nothing for them and they can carry on with their life.
My other question... Is it still working? Yeah. My other question...
Switched you off, that's okay.
Just about, I guess, maybe it's a cultural problem we're having now with social media addiction, a lot of anxiety, maybe like gaming. There's a whole generation of young people that are struggling with, I guess, those types of issues. Would you say it's something that we need to be addressing before it becomes a problem? Or, we could almost have you in every school talking to 90% of the teens soon to try and help them with some of the issues that are becoming commonplace.
No, it's definitely a growing issue, if that makes sense. So the peer pressure, the social media causes a lot of issues. We were asked about this when the governments were talking about trying to ban phones from schools. Actually, most schools have got that policy in place anyway, so that during the working day they can't have, the school day they can't have them. But I don't think that's actually probably the best approach to do. You've got to help educate the kids to actually take responsibility for their phones, because there's so much good with technology that you've got to be able to use them as well. It's not your normal type of addiction, because you do actually need technology for the future. So it's trying to understand that and give them tools to be able to deal with it. So things like, as a parent, I stop my kids putting their phones in their bedroom. So they go to bed, you're not taking your phone in there. Did do a test many years ago with my daughter, and she kept it in there and she was on the phone all night because it kept peeing because somebody was on the phone and she didn't want to miss out on that group chat on Snapchat. And she felt if she wasn't on there, it was going to be the end of the world. And actually, little experiment after one day, and she went, that was stupid, wasn't it? I'm exhausted, and actually, what did I get out of it? It was just so-and-so who was pinging silly messages, but you can't always do that. But I think that, there's things like that you can do on the social media to help them. And education is important on that, and it's just trying to help through the schools to try and help them realise that along with everything else. But yes, unfortunately, we can't get into every school to do that. We'd love to. Same with vaping. We'd love to go in there and just try and give them awareness of vaping and understanding that actually it's not risk-free.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for everyone's questions. If we give Paul another round of applause. Yeah,